You skip the button, 13 floors up, and the elevator panel jumps straight from 12 to 14, as if a number simply vanished from existence. You've seen this 100 times and barely register it anymore, but stop for a second and ask why an entire building would rather lie about its own floor count than print 3 ordinary digits. The answer is older than elevators, older than buildings, older than most of the fears you carry without noticing. It reaches back through centuries of superstition, ancient number systems, and a strange corner of your brain that still treats certain patterns as warnings. Start with the number 12. For most of recorded history, 12 was not just a number, it was a structure. 12 months shaped the calendar, 12 hours divided the day. 12 signs mapped the zodiac. Ancient Babylonian mathematicians built entire systems of measurement around 12 because it divides so cleanly into halves, thirds, and quarters. 12 felt complete, it felt like something that closed a circle. 13 broke that circle, it came right after completeness and offered nothing but excess, one more than a system that already worked. To ancient minds trained to see order as safety, 13 looked less like a number and more like an intrusion. This is where the psychology gets interesting. Human brains are pattern recognition machines. Your ancestors survived not by understanding chemistry or physics, but by noticing patterns fast enough to react before danger arrived. A rustle in the grass, a shift in the wind. A number that broke an expected sequence. Psychologists call this tendency apophenia, the instinct to find meaning, and sometimes threat, in patterns that may or may not mean anything at all. It kept early humans alive more often than it misled them, so evolution kept the trait running, even when the pattern in question is nothing more than a digit on a wall. 13 slid easily into that instinct. Once a number is framed as the one that ruins order, the mind starts hunting for evidence to confirm it. This is what researchers call confirmation bias, first named in modern psychology by Peter Wason. You notice the bad thing that happened on a Friday the 13th. You forget the thousands of ordinary Fridays that number never touched. But fear of 13, known formally as triskaidekaphobia, did not stay abstract. Cultures gave it stories to hold on to. In Norse mythology, 12 gods sat down to a peaceful feast in Valhalla. Loki, uninvited, arrived as the 13th guest and set off a chain of chaos that ended with the death of Baldur, one of the most beloved gods. The number 13 became tied quite literally to an outsider who disrupted harmony and brought tragedy with him. Christian tradition carried a similar shape at the Last Supper. 13 people sat at the table, Jesus and his 12 apostles. Judas, the betrayer, is traditionally counted as the 13th to take his seat. The next day brought the crucifixion. For centuries afterward, having 13 guests at a table was considered a quiet omen, a signal that someone at that table might not make it to the next gathering. Stories like these did something psychologically powerful. They gave an abstract number a face, a motive, a moment of betrayal. Numbers alone rarely frighten people for long. Numbers wrapped in narrative do by the medieval period. The fear had folded itself into daily life. Hosts avoided seating 13 guests together, builders skipped the number on doors and floors. Sailors were wary of departing on a 13th day. None of this required proof, it only required enough people repeating the same avoidance, until skipping 13 felt like common sense rather than superstition. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. In the late 19th century, a group of skeptics in New York decided to challenge the superstition directly. They formed a club fittingly called the 13 Club and deliberately sat 13 members at a table under a banner, reading in spirit, if not in exact words, that they refused to fear a number. They walked under ladders, they spilled salt on purpose. Founding members included several US presidents as honorary guests over the years, at least according to the club's own later accounts. The group intended to prove the fear was irrational, and in some circles it worked. Yet the superstition never disappeared, it simply adapted, moving from dinner tables into hotel floor numbers, flight rows, and horror movie release dates. Modern behavioral economists have offered another layer to this puzzle. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, whose work reshaped how psychologists understand decision-making, showed that humans are wired for loss aversion. We feel the sting of a potential loss more sharply than the pleasure of an equivalent gain. If 13 is culturally coded as a number associated with loss, betrayal, or bad luck, the brain does not need logical proof to start avoiding it. Avoidance itself feels like protection, even when there is nothing tangible to protect against. That is likely why builders in the 20th century kept skipping the number on floor panels, even in an age of skyscrapers built with steel and engineering precision rather than myth. It costs nothing to relabel a floor. It costs potential unease and potential hesitation from superstitious guests to leave it as is. So elevators quietly lie, Floor 13 becomes floor 14, and an entire building bends its own numbering system around a fear most people cannot fully explain if you ask them directly. Think about how strange that actually is. A modern structure designed with mathematical precision down to the load-bearing beam still curves around an ancient discomfort with counting. Logic built the tower, instinct decided which floor to call the 13th. This pattern shows up again and again in human behavior. Rational systems get built on top of irrational instincts, and instead of the rational system erasing the old fear, it simply makes space for it. Airlines skip row 13. Hospitals sometimes skip the labeled floor. Formula 1 removed the number 13 from car designations for decades before eventually reintroducing it. What all of this reveals is not that ancient humans were foolish and modern humans are enlightened. It reveals that the brain you're using right now evolved to spot patterns first and question them second. That instinct once meant the difference between noticing a predator in time and not noticing at all. Today, it shows up as an unease around a number, a habit of skipping a floor, or a flicker of hesitation before boarding a flight on a certain date. So the next time you step into an elevator and watch the numbers skip from 12 to 14, notice what is actually happening. You're not just avoiding superstition, you're watching thousands of years of pattern-seeking instinct quietly steer a decision that logic alone would never have made. The floor was never missing, your ancestors just taught your brain to skip it.